I found lubricant in my wife's car that she didn't buy for me, swapped it with superglue, hid cameras all over the house, and 3 days later watched on my phone as my wife and her lover, naked and glued together, screamed in agony while I calmly sipped coffee in my hotel room. Before we start, please don't forget to like and subscribe. My name is John Matthews. I'm 43. I work in corporate finance for a mid-sized firm out in suburban Connecticut, and up until recently, I honestly thought I had life all figured out. Not in some spectacular way, mind you, just figured out. Claire and I had built what I genuinely believed was a solid partnership over 15 years. No kids, but that was a mutual choice we'd made early on and never second-guessed. We had our routines down. Coffee together every morning before work, quiet dinners right at 7:30, weekend trips to the farmer's market. The intimacy had faded over time, and what marriage doesn't go through that? But I always chalked it up to age, work stress, the usual progression of any long-term relationship. Claire worked as an office manager at a dental practice. Nothing flashy, but reliable. At 39, she still turned heads whenever we went out, something I'd gotten used to over the years. Other men checking her out always seemed to amuse her more than tempt her. Or at least, that's what I told myself. That Saturday in March started like any other weekend. We'd driven to the park for our usual walk. The spring air still had that leftover winter chill. Claire was wearing her oversized sunglasses even though the sky was overcast, a little habit I'd always found charming. "Honey, can you grab my regular glasses from the car?" she asked, squinting at her phone. "These are way too dark to read anything in this light." I jogged back to her Lexus, whistling some tune I can't even remember now. Her purse was on the passenger seat, but I knew she kept a spare pair in the glove box. As I reached over to open it, my hand bumped something tucked under the passenger seat. Curious, I bent down and felt around until my fingers closed around a small bottle, personal lubricant. KY Intense, the kind specifically marketed for enhancement. I just stood there in the parking lot, holding that bottle like it was a live grenade. My brain started running through every possible explanation, each one more pathetic than the last. Maybe she bought it for us, except we hadn't been intimate in 3 months. Maybe it was old, but the receipt tucked underneath was dated just 2 weeks ago, and the bottle had been deliberately hidden, pushed way back under the seat behind the floor mat rail. This wasn't something that had accidentally rolled out of a shopping bag. This was concealment. Deliberate concealment. "Did you find them?" Claire's voice called across the parking lot. I shoved the bottle back exactly where I'd found it, grabbed her glasses from the glove box, and walked back wearing what I hoped looked like a normal expression. My face felt like a mask that could crack if I smiled too wide. "Here you go," I said, handing them over. She swapped out her sunglasses, looked at me, and her brow furrowed just a little. "You okay? You look pale." "Just winded from the jog," I lied. "Not as young as I used to be." She laughed, that light, tinkling sound I'd loved for 15 years. Now it hit my ears differently, practiced, performative. We finished our walk, Claire chattering away about her week, office drama, plans for spring cleaning. I nodded along and gave the right responses while my mind tore apart every single word she said, looking for tells, for lies, for slips. When exactly had I become suspicious of my own wife? About 10 minutes ago, apparently. That night, I lay in bed beside her sleeping form, staring up at the ceiling fan making its lazy circles. Her breathing was deep and even, the kind of sleep you'd expect from someone with nothing to hide, or someone who'd just gotten very comfortable with deception. The lubricant wasn't for us. I knew that with absolute certainty, which meant it was for someone else, someone she was seeing, someone she was with while I sat in my office crunching quarterly numbers. I could confront her right then, wake her up, demand answers, have the big fight that ends with either a messy reconciliation or lawyers getting involved. That's what most guys would do. That's what emotional guys would do. But I'd built my entire career on being methodical, strategic, thorough. You don't walk into a boardroom throwing accusations without documentation. You don't enter negotiations without leverage. I wasn't about to be the fool who confronted his cheating wife armed with nothing but suspicion. I was going to be the man who destroyed her with cold, hard evidence. I became someone else in the days that followed. A man living 2 separate lives, divided by a membrane so thin I sometimes lost track of which one was real. By day, I was still John Matthews, the devoted husband, bringing Claire coffee in bed, asking how her day went, keeping up our routines with suffocating normalcy. By night, I was something entirely different, calculating, methodical, preparing for war with the patience of a sniper. Monday morning came, and Claire left for work with her usual peck on my cheek. The second her car disappeared around the corner, I was in motion. The lubricant bottle. I needed to see it again, study it, really understand it. I found it exactly where I'd left it, still wedged behind that floor mat rail like a dirty little secret. This time, I photographed it from every single angle, documenting its position, the receipt, the brand. KY Intense. Designed for heightened sensation and passionate encounters. Not exactly the kind of thing a woman buys for a husband she barely touches. That's when the idea hit me. I drove to 3 different stores to avoid raising any suspicion, buying supplies with cash, industrial-strength superglue, the kind used for automotive repairs, a small syringe from a hobby shop, and latex gloves from a pharmacy. I felt like a criminal getting ready for a heist, except what I was planning was way more personal. Back home, I got to work with surgical precision. The KY bottle's cap came off easily. These things aren't exactly built for security. Using the syringe, I siphoned out most of the actual lubricant and replaced it with superglue, carefully matching the same weight and consistency. The real trick was resealing the cap. I applied a thin layer of adhesive to the threads, just enough to create a bond that would take serious force to break. When someone finally did open it, it would feel like normal resistance, maybe just a sticky cap. They'd never suspect the contents had been swapped until it was way too late. I put the bottle back in its hiding spot, making sure everything looked completely undisturbed. Claire would never know I'd found her secret. Not yet. Phase 2 started that evening. "Honey," I said over dinner, slicing into my steak with practiced calm. "I've been thinking about home security." Claire looked up from her salad. "Home security? There have been break-ins over in the Riverside neighborhood. 3 of them just this past month." This was true. I'd done my homework. "I want to install some cameras. Nothing too invasive, just enough to keep us safe." She shrugged. "If it makes you feel better. You know I don't pay attention to any of that tech stuff anyway." Perfect. Her complete disinterest in technology would be her downfall. I spent the next 3 days installing a state-of-the-art system. Hidden cameras tucked inside smoke detectors, motion sensors disguised as air fresheners, even one that looked like a phone charger in our bedroom. Everything connected to a cloud server I could access from my phone. I also made a show of installing obvious cameras at the front and back doors, decoys for Claire to notice and feel comfortable about. "You're so thorough," she commented, watching me adjust the front door camera. "I love how you take care of us." Us. That word tasted like ash in my mouth. My preparations went way beyond just surveillance. I opened a new bank account at a completely different bank, moving small amounts that wouldn't raise any flags. I photographed every document in our filing cabinet: tax returns, investment statements, the prenuptial agreement we'd signed 15 years ago, back when we were young and in love and stupid enough to think we'd never need it. The prenup had actually been her father's idea. He'd insisted on it, wanting to protect his daughter's future inheritance. The irony was absolutely delicious. It protected my assets in case of adultery. Claire had laughed when she signed it. "Like either of us would ever cheat," she'd said back then. I consulted 3 different divorce attorneys, paying cash for the consultations under a fake name. "Just research," I told them. Hypothetical scenarios. They all told me the same thing. With video evidence of adultery and a solid prenup, she'd walk away with nothing. The hardest part was keeping up appearances while my entire world was tilting sideways. Claire would curl up against me on the couch, and I'd force myself not to pull away. She'd tell me about her day, and I'd dissect every word for hidden meanings. When she said she was having lunch with her friend Sarah, I'd check Sarah's Instagram later. No photos of lunch, no mention of Claire anywhere. The lies kept piling up like evidence in a courtroom. Working late became her favorite excuse, even though the dental office closed at 5. Shopping trips that produced 0 shopping bags. A new password on her phone. She claimed it was for work security. Thursday night. She was unusually affectionate, running her fingers through my hair while we watched TV. "I love you," she said out of nowhere. "I love you too," I replied automatically. The words felt hollow. "I was thinking," she went on, "you work so hard. You should take a trip. That conference in Chicago you mentioned last month, you really should go." I hadn't mentioned any conference, but I played along. "Maybe you're right. You could go next week. Take a whole week. Relax. Network. I'll be fine here on my own. There it was. She was trying to clear me out, make space for whatever she had planned. Actually, I said, the plan crystallizing in my head instantly. That's a great idea. I'll book it tomorrow. She smiled, genuinely pleased. I saw it clearly then. The excitement she couldn't quite hide. The anticipation of having freedom. That night, I built an elaborate fiction, flights, hotel reservations, a full conference schedule. I printed everything out and left it casually on my dresser where she'd see it. I even packed a suitcase, complete with conference-appropriate clothes. Sunday came way too quickly, and not fast enough. Claire drove me to the airport, kissing me goodbye with enthusiasm that felt like a performance. Have a great week, she said brightly. Don't work too hard. I'll miss you, I told her, meaning it in a way she'd never understand. I would miss the woman I thought I'd married, the life I thought we'd built together. I watched her drive away, then grabbed a cab to the Hampton Inn, just 15 minutes from our house. Room 237, paid for in cash under a different name. I set up my laptop, connected to our home security system, and settled in to watch my marriage fall apart in real time. As I watched her wave goodbye from our front door through the security camera feed, I realized I wasn't leaving for a business trip at all. I was leaving to watch my wife destroy herself. Monday came and went without incident. Claire went to work, came home, made dinner, watched Netflix. She seemed restless, kept checking her phone, but nothing happened. I sat in my hotel room eating takeout and started wondering if I'd misread the whole situation. Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. The motion alert hit my phone at exactly 2:47 p.m. Claire's car pulling into the driveway, 3 full hours before the dental office even closed. My heart started pounding as I opened the security app and switched to the front door camera. She wasn't alone. A black BMW pulled in right behind her. Late model, tinted windows, exactly the kind of car that screams compensation. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a man who made my stomach twist with both recognition and rage. Not recognition because I knew him. I'd never seen this guy before, but recognition of a type. Tall, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, dark hair styled with product, the kind of build that comes from gym selfies and protein shakes. 35 at most, wearing a tight polo that showed off arms Claire would definitely find irresistible. He walked up to our front door, my front door, with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this before. I switched over to the living room camera as they walked inside. The familiarity between them was instant, obvious, practiced. He didn't look around with curiosity like a first-time visitor. He already knew exactly where to hang his jacket, which way the kitchen was. This wasn't new. This had been going on for a while. God, I missed you, he said, pulling her against him. Derek, she breathed against his mouth. It's been way too long. Now he had a name. I screenshotted everything, recorded everything. My hands completely steady despite the rage that was building in my chest. They kissed like teenagers, hungry, messy, desperate. His hands were all over her, and she was laughing, that genuine, throaty laugh I hadn't heard in years. When was the last time she'd laughed like that with me? Want some wine? She offered. Later, he replied, already pulling her toward the hallway. I've been thinking about you all week. They moved past the camera's range, but I already knew where they were going. Not our bedroom. Even Claire had at least that much decency, apparently. The guest room camera activated, and I forced myself to watch. Evidence. I needed evidence. They were on each other immediately, clothes flying off with practiced efficiency. No awkwardness, no hesitation. They'd clearly choreographed this dance many times before. How many times had she done this while I was at work? How many times in our house, in our bed? I watched Derek reach for Claire's purse. She must have told him where she kept the bottle. He pulled out the lubricant, and my pulse quickened. This was it. Jesus, this cap is stuck, he muttered, twisting hard. Just pull it, she said impatiently, already naked and waiting. He yanked harder. I could see his forearm straining, the kind of force that would absolutely break my seal. There was an audible pop as it finally gave way. What happened next was both horrifying and completely justified. They'd applied it generously, way too caught up in the moment to notice the unusual consistency or the slightly off smell. Superglue doesn't work instantly. It needs a moment, pressure, skin contact. They gave it all 3. The screaming started about 90 seconds later. What the hell? Derek shouted, his voice shooting up with panic. Oh God. Oh God, something's wrong. Claire was crying out too, her voice shrill with pain and terror. I watched the horror dawn on their faces as they tried to separate and couldn't. Derek attempted to pull away, which made Claire scream even louder. They were stuck together in the most intimate, humiliating way imaginable. What is this? Derek examined the bottle, his face twisting in horror. This is glue. This is freaking glue. That's impossible. Claire sobbed. I bought it myself. She stopped mid-sentence, and I saw the moment realization started to creep across her face. Not full understanding yet, but the first crack of suspicion. They tried everything. Derek, panicking, went for brute force, which made both of them howl in agony. Claire begged him to stop, then suggested water. They managed an awkward shuffle to the guest bathroom, but water did nothing against industrial adhesive. Their skin was bonded at the molecular level. We need help, Claire whimpered. We need an ambulance. Are you insane? Derek's voice was pure panic now. We can't. How would we even explain this? I don't care, she screamed back. I don't care anymore. This hurts so much. Please, just call. I watched Derek fumble for his phone, trying to hold onto some shred of dignity while literally attached to my wife. The conversation with 911 was almost comedic in its horror. We need an ambulance, he said urgently, then paused, struggling to find the words. No, we're not injured exactly. We're stuck together. No, not trapped, stuck with adhesive. Please, just send someone. Claire was sobbing uncontrollably now, the kind of deep, humiliated tears that come when you realize your whole life is about to change forever. She was right about that. The dispatcher probably thought it was a prank at first, but Derek's desperate insistence finally convinced them. I heard him give our address, my address, and say the words that would seal their fate. Please hurry, and maybe be discreet. There would be no discretion. Not for this. I checked out of the hotel methodically, taking my sweet time. No need to rush. They weren't going anywhere. The 15-minute drive home felt like a victory lap. Every red light was just another moment to savor what was coming. As I turned onto our street, I could see the ambulance parked right in our driveway, lights flashing like a beacon, calling every single neighbor outside to witness. Mrs. Bennett from next door was already standing on her lawn, phone in hand. The teenage Parker boys were filming from their bikes. I parked slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone saw me arrive, making sure they all knew I was coming home to this. As I pulled up to the house I'd shared with Claire for 15 years, I realized I wasn't going home to comfort my wife. I was going home to watch her entire world come crashing down. The scene inside was organized chaos. 2 paramedics were kneeling beside the guest bed, their professional composure cracking around the edges. A police officer stood near the door, notepad in hand, looking like he'd rather be absolutely anywhere else. The smell hit me first, adhesive remover, sharp and chemical, mixing with the musty stench of fear and sweat. Sir, you can't, the officer started to say. I'm John Matthews, I interrupted calmly, pulling out my driver's license. This is my house. That's my wife. The officer's face cycled through several expressions, surprise, embarrassment, and finally deep, uncomfortable pity. Mr. Matthews, there's been an incident. So I see, I replied, stepping right past him. The guest bedroom door was wide open, and what I saw inside was even better than anything I'd imagined. Claire and Derek were barely covered by medical sheets, but their situation was painfully obvious. The paramedics had managed to separate some of their skin using chemical solvents, but the most intimate areas were still bonded. Claire's face was red and swollen from crying, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. Derek wouldn't look at anyone, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitching. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Sir, you can't. One of the paramedics began to protest. Insurance documentation, I said smoothly. I'll need evidence for the claim. Claire's eyes found mine through her tears, and I watched her face transform in real time. Horror, dawning understanding, and finally raw, naked fear. John, she whispered. Oh God, John, I can explain. No need. I cut her off, keeping the camera steady. The situation explains itself pretty clearly. Derek finally looked up, and our eyes locked. This was the man who'd been in my house, in my bed, inside my wife. This younger, stronger, more handsome guy who thought he could take what was mine without any consequences. Listen, man, he started, his voice strained. We didn't know. Someone switched the rage I'd kept bottled up for an entire week finally erupted. I crossed the room in 2 strides and drove my fist straight into his jaw with 15 years of suppressed fury behind it. His head snapped back, blood exploding from his nose, spraying across the medical sheet, across my wife's skin. That's for using my house, I said quietly, shaking out my hand. And my wife. The room exploded into motion. The paramedics rushed to separate us while the officer stepped between Derek and me. Claire was screaming, not from pain this time, but from the sheer realization that her whole world was collapsing around her. Do you want to press charges? The officer asked Derek, who was clutching his bleeding nose. He attacked me. Derek spat out blood. You're trespassing in his house, the officer pointed out flatly. With his wife? I'd say you got off easy. I turned to the officer. Am I free to document this for insurance purposes? He shrugged. It's your house. I kept filming, capturing everything. The medical equipment, the chemical bottles, the blood staining the sheets, Claire trying to cover herself while still physically attached to her lover, Derek's face already starting to swell up beautifully. We need to transport them, one paramedic announced. They'll need surgical separation at the hospital. Together? I asked innocently. In the same ambulance? We don't have a choice, the paramedic replied, clearly wishing he'd just called in sick that morning. As they prepared Claire and Derek for transport, a process that involved a specially modified gurney and a whole lot of awkward positioning, I followed them outside. The crowd had grown significantly. Half the neighborhood was out there, phones raised, recording everything. Mrs. Bennett looked both scandalized and absolutely delighted. The Parker boys were live streaming. Claire saw all of them, and fresh tears poured down her face. Please, she begged the paramedics. Can't you cover us more? But there was no covering this. No hiding what she'd done, what she'd become. As they loaded her into the ambulance, still grotesquely attached to Derek like some medieval punishment for adultery, our eyes met one final time. How? She mouthed silently. I just smiled and kept filming. The ambulance doors closed, but the show wasn't over yet. I turned to address the crowd. My neighbors, the people we'd barbecued with, whose kids we'd watched grow up, whose lives had crossed paths with ours for years. I apologize for the disturbance, I announced formally. I've been in Chicago all week for business. I came home early to surprise my wife. I paused, letting the irony sink in. Surprise. Someone actually applauded. A few others laughed nervously. Mrs. Bennett approached me, her face a mask of sympathy. John, dear, if you need anything. Actually, I said loudly, loud enough for everyone to hear. If anyone has video of what happened here today, I'd really appreciate copies for the divorce proceedings. At least 6 people immediately offered to send me footage. I went back inside my house, not ours anymore, and poured myself a scotch. The good stuff, the 20-year Macallan I'd been saving for a special occasion. If this didn't qualify, nothing ever would. My phone was already blowing up. Text messages, Facebook notifications, calls from numbers I didn't even recognize. The story was spreading like wildfire through our entire social circle. By tomorrow, absolutely everyone would know. I made 2 calls. First, Dylan Caldwell, the best divorce attorney I'd found during my research. Dylan, it's John Matthews. Remember that hypothetical situation we discussed? It's not hypothetical anymore. How bad? He asked immediately. She was literally glued to him. The paramedics just took them away, still attached. There was a long silence. Then, I'll clear my schedule. Can you come in tomorrow? 9 a.m. Bring everything, videos, photos, financial documents, everything. The second call was to my office. Jim, it's John. I need to extend my time off, family emergency. He expressed concern. Yes, Claire and I are separating. I appreciate that. Another week should do it. Thanks for understanding. I sat in my living room, in the house I'd worked 15 years to pay for, and felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but peace. The waiting was over. The pretending was done. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of dismantling Claire's life piece by piece, legally and thoroughly. As I watched my wife disappear into that ambulance, still attached to her lover like some twisted cautionary tale for other cheaters, I realized my real work was just beginning. Dylan Caldwell's office occupied the top floor of a glass building with a view over downtown Hartford. Expensive art on the walls, leather furniture everywhere. The kind of place that silently whispers, "You can't afford me," to most people. But I could afford him, and more importantly, I could afford to destroy Claire the right way. Dylan watched the footage on my phone with the expression of a man witnessing a miracle. "In 30 years of practice," he said, setting the phone down, "I have never seen anything like this. This is beautiful. I have 8 different angles from neighbors," I added, sliding a thumb drive across his desk, plus all the security footage from my house showing their affair in progress. He opened the prenuptial agreement, scanning the adultery clause Claire's father had insisted on. The irony was still delicious. "She gets nothing," Dylan confirmed. "The house is in your name, purchased before the marriage. The investment accounts are protected. The retirement funds are yours. With this kind of evidence, she won't even get alimony. What can she actually fight for? Her personal belongings and her car, which I see is in her name. Maybe some cash for moving expenses if she gets a sympathetic judge. But John," he leaned forward, "no judge is going to be sympathetic after seeing this footage." We filed that very afternoon. Dylan had the papers drawn up in record time, citing adultery with photographic and video evidence attached. He also filed an emergency motion for exclusive use of the marital home, arguing that Claire had defiled it with her affair. "Defiled?" I questioned. "Legal term," Dylan grinned. "Judges eat that biblical stuff right up." While the legal machinery started turning, the social destruction was happening all on its own. Someone, probably one of the Parker boys, had posted the video online with the title, "Cheating Wife Literally Glued to Lover." It went viral within hours, not globally viral, but Connecticut viral, which was more than enough. Claire's Facebook page was gone by evening. Derek's Instagram went private, then disappeared entirely. I learned from the hospital grapevine, amazing how many people suddenly wanted to talk to me, that the surgical separation had taken 3 full hours. They needed a plastic surgeon to minimize the scarring, though some of it would be permanent. Both of them were kept overnight for observation and to manage infection risk. Derek vanished immediately after discharge. His BMW never came back to our street. His apartment, which I'd found through some creative online searching, had a moving truck outside 2 days later. Claire tried calling him dozens of times, according to the phone records Dylan subpoenaed, but every single call went unanswered. He'd disappeared like smoke, leaving Claire to face the fallout completely alone. She showed up at the house on Thursday, escorted by a police officer per the emergency order. She was allowed 2 hours to pack her personal belongings under supervision. I stayed in my office, door locked, listening to her sob as she filled her suitcases. "Can I talk to him?" I heard her ask the officer. "Just for 5 minutes." "Ma'am, that would violate the court order. You'll get your chance in court." When she left, I checked and found she'd taken only clothes and toiletries. Our wedding photos were still on the walls. Her jewelry, gifts I'd given her over the years, sat untouched in the bedroom. Either she felt too guilty to take them, or she knew they were worthless now in the face of everything she'd lost. The divorce proceedings moved with unusual speed. Claire's attorney, a tired-looking woman named Patricia Morse, did her best with an impossible case. "My client claims she was set up," Patricia argued at the first hearing. "Someone tampered with her personal items." "Your client," Dylan responded smoothly, "was engaged in adultery in the marital home. Whether she chose the wrong lubricant is completely irrelevant to the fact of her infidelity, which is documented extensively." The judge, a stern woman named Harriet Powell, reviewed the evidence with barely concealed disgust. "Mrs. Matthews," she addressed Claire directly, "do you deny having an affair?" Claire, wearing a conservative dress that couldn't quite hide the faint scars on her neck, whispered, "No, Your Honor." "Do you deny bringing your lover into the marital home?" "No, Your Honor." "Then this court sees no relevance in your claim of tampering. The prenuptial agreement is clear and valid. Adultery voids any claim to marital assets." The final decree was brutal in its simplicity. Claire got her car, her personal belongings, and a cash payment of $5,000, which was actually my idea, enough for a security deposit and first month's rent somewhere. I wasn't a monster. I just wanted justice. Dylan handled everything brilliantly. Claire's attempts to claim emotional abuse went nowhere. Her lawyer's suggestion that I'd somehow orchestrated the whole thing was dismissed as desperate speculation without any real evidence. Even if Mr. Matthews had somehow switched the contents, Judge Powell noted, it wouldn't change the fundamental fact of adultery. This court will not reward infidelity just because the cheating party chose an unfortunate lubricant. Someone in the gallery actually snickered. The last time I ever saw Claire was at the final settlement meeting. She'd lost weight, her face gaunt and hollow. The confident woman who'd laughed with her lover in my living room was completely gone, replaced by someone who just looked broken. Why? She asked when the lawyers stepped out to file the final papers. If you knew, why didn't you just divorce me? I considered lying, maybe giving her some small comfort, but she deserved the truth. Because you made me a fool, I said simply. In my own house, in my own bed. You didn't just cheat, Claire, you humiliated me. So I returned the favor. I loved you, she whispered. No, I replied firmly. You loved the life I provided. There's a difference. She signed the papers without saying another word. Later, I learned through the suburban gossip network that she'd moved 2 towns over and found a job as a receptionist at a medical clinic. The story had followed her. Small towns have long memories for spectacular scandals like this. Someone told me they'd seen her at a grocery store once, head down, avoiding eye contact with absolutely everyone. Derek Polson vanished completely. Some people said he'd moved to California, others claimed Florida. One persistent rumor suggested he'd actually changed his name. I didn't care enough to investigate. As Claire walked out of that conference room with nothing but the clothes on her back, I realized that revenge wasn't just a dish best served cold. It was a feast best served with witnesses. 6 months later, my life has found its new rhythm. The house feels different now, not empty exactly, just honest. I've redecorated the guest room, turned it into a home office. The security cameras are still active, though mostly they just capture delivery drivers and the occasional raccoon. Old habits die hard. The story has become a suburban legend. I'm known as the guy whose wife got glued to her lover, spoken about with a weird mix of sympathy and admiration. Women at the gym suddenly find excuses to chat me up. My neighbor Mrs. Bennett regularly brings over casseroles and mentions her divorced daughter, who's about my age and very accomplished, apparently. I delete dating app matches without even reading their profiles. 3 women from neighboring towns have reached out on Facebook, all mentioning they'd heard about my situation and admiring how I handled things. My story, it seems, has become a kind of litmus test for a certain type of woman, the kind who appreciates calculated justice over emotional explosions. I'm not ready for that. May never be. Claire lives about 30 minutes away now, in a studio apartment above a pizza shop. I know this not because I've stalked her, but because mutual acquaintances can't seem to stop updating me. She works at a medical clinic, drives a 10-year-old Honda, keeps mostly to herself. Someone mentioned seeing her at a coffee shop, reading alone, looking resigned. That's the exact word they used, resigned. The financial settlement left me very comfortable. The house is worth more now without the weight of a failed marriage dragging it down. My investment portfolio, no longer supporting 2 people, has grown substantially. I've taken up golf, joined a book club, started learning Italian. All cliché middle-aged divorce activities, but they fill the time. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if I went too far, if a simple divorce would have been enough. Then I remember the sound of her laughing with Derek in our living room, the practiced ease with which they moved together, the months or years of deception I'll probably never fully uncover. No, I didn't go too far. I went exactly far enough. My phone buzzes with a text from Dylan Caldwell. He's handling another divorce case and wants to know if I'd be willing to speak with his client, a guy whose wife has been cheating with his business partner. He needs to know there's justice possible, Dylan writes. I agreed to meet him, not to share my exact methods. Those were specific to my situation, but to share the philosophy, document everything, plan carefully, strike decisively. Make the cost of betrayal so high that it becomes a cautionary tale for anyone else. The man I meet is younger than me, maybe 35, with that shell-shocked look of someone who just recently discovered the truth. Over coffee, I give him an abbreviated version of my story. His eyes widen at the glue part, then narrow with appreciation at the planning. Did it make you feel better? He asks. The revenge. No, I answer honestly. But it made me feel even. And sometimes that's enough. He nods, understanding completely. I sleep well these days. 8 hours straight. No nightmares, no regrets. My conscience is clear. I didn't create Claire's betrayal. I only made sure it had consequences. Spectacular, humiliating, publicly documented consequences that will follow her for the rest of her life. Justice, I've learned, isn't always swift, but when it's properly planned, when every contingency is considered and every detail is executed perfectly, it can be absolutely devastating. The cost of betrayal, it turns out, is everything. Claire paid it in full. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here, or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.